זאת אומרת,
Noach was Nach. He is what he is. Not much different at the end of his life than at the beginning. He's gone through certain things. Avraham is Lech. Start with a real Sudashi sheet, little word. Never mind. The opening, Lech Lecha. My whole share is going to be about those words. In other words, we're not going to be talking about the whole horizontal spread of the Parsha, talking about horizontal and vertical last week. We're going to be focusing on two words, and actually, if I want to be really provocative, perverse, I'll say on one word, lecha. Lech, I understand, travel, go. What's the lecha doing there? So there are two views. One, which is what I would call the focused attention view. I'm thinking about two kinds of attention. And you've got certain artwork here, which I hope to get to, and to somehow make fit into what I want to talk about. I wanted to share it with you anyway, because I think it's a useful way of approaching anything. But one way of looking at Lecha is, as the Ramban does at the beginning of his commentary, is to say it means nothing. Don't pay attention to it. It's just a little word that's there. It's like an idiom. Brach lecha, the beloved in the Song of Songs. It has to flee. It means get away, flee quickly. It's a word of energy in a way. Not just go, but get going. Something like that. And in Greek, it's known as an enclitic. In Greek texts, when you have a little word and when you see it, you just know it's actually meaningless. But it has meaning on a completely different level. It affects the speed, the tempo of the text, which normally we don't have musical notes to tell us how to read it. All right. I'm sorry? Lecha. The Greek, enclitic. It's the name of the genre of the how it's categorized. Enclitic. You can look it up. So lech lecha, nothing. On the other hand, the Midrashic tradition, and in its wake, the Hasidic traditions go to town on it. They have an enormous amount to say about the word lecha. And that's what we're going to be delving into. So rather than horizontal, vertical, in the sense of we're going to be building a block, of possible meanings. And then we're going to see how it's complicated by the horizontal. That you can't forget the horizontal as your okay. So I want to start away from our focus, right? Already too complicated, and to remember what stayed in my mind very much from last week. I mean, many things stayed, but one thing particularly is the chiba yetera idea. Chaviv Adam shenivra b'tselem. The Mishnah that says that the human being is especially precious, lovable, loved by God, something to do with love, chaviv, because he was created in the image of God. Shouldn't he be specially? He's created in the image of God, so of course God must love him. He is like God, so he's lovable to God, presumably. Chaviv, but chiba yetera, an exceeding love, a surplus love, yetera, right? I'll use that word, surplus, because it already is a little bit uneasy, and I'm interested in the uneasy. Yeah, not to say difficult. Yetera nodatlo, a person who has consciousness of being created in the image of God is extra lovable. That is okay. So what is it to be lovable? It has something to do with a kind of intimacy that God can feel for those who is in his image, right? It's all anthropomorphic. We're going to be dealing with that subject today about anthropomorphism and how we look at God, how we think about God. And I'm going to be trying to say some very difficult things, I tried last night in the previous class and I wasn't happy about it, and I hope I'll do better today. So God, the image is that God, God has a friendly eye for those who are created in his image. That's human beings. but especially friendly eye and especially intimate relationship for those who are conscious. That is, they bear the consciousness within them of being created in the image of God. What makes the difference? Da'at, yediyah, knowledge, conscious. Somehow they've been made to know. No da'at lo. It's in the passive, almost impersonal. Something or other has made them know that they are. God perhaps made Noach know. In the text, it's very clear that God actually told Noach. We talked about this last week. He was the first human being who to be told by God in so many words. You know, man is created in the image of God. Adam was never told. God simply thought to himself, and then he did it. But he never informed anyone. So all the loving is on his part. All the sense of knowledge. Where does the knowledge come from? The knowledge comes from God. As soon as a person is conscious, there's something different going on. There's something yetera. The human being is now filled with a surplus. There's something there you can't quite manage. If you really, something has made you aware that you're created in the image of God. In our case, it probably isn't God appearing in a revelation, but it's God appearing in other forms. That's my subject later, when we get to it. It's something that happened, it seems to me. How does one get to really know, other than reading the text? That's not the kind of knowledge we're talking about. We have read it in the Torah. Something in life, right? A life experience has happened, which somehow contains the theological in it. That I sense it as giving me a knowledge of some kind. And that's when I get a live sense of God. Okay. So Chaviv Yetera. At the end of the Parsha, before Sodom, right? Horizontal. I said I wasn't going to go horizontal. At the end of the Parsha, Perik Yud Chet, Pasuk Yud Tet, Yud Tet, God says, you have it, yes? Ki Yadativ, God says about Abraham, for I have known him, so that he will command his children and his household after him, and they will keep the way of God to do righteousness and justice, in order that God will then fulfill for Abraham everything he has promised him. Rather complicated pasuk. But God says, I have known him. That is, I'm conscious of him. I've become intimate with him on some level. Yadativ. Vayeda Adam et Chava ishto. That's the classic verse that's often quoted that about sexual knowing. And Adam knew his wife. And that's what's called biblical knowledge, usually with a little smile, biblical knowledge. But it's no joke, because we're not only talking about sexuality, like the physical reality of knowledge. I don't have to spell it out. It's something that just suggests to us. When we think of sexuality, that's just the first marker. And then we move on from there and we think, what is there in the world that's like that? And so we come to the general idea of intimacy. And God says somewhere, I am intimate with him. I know him through and through. Why? And Rashi says very simply, I just love the simplicity, Hamachabev et Adam mekarvo etzlo umakiro v'yodo. If you love someone, you draw them close to you in intimacy. You don't keep them afar, right? In the most everyday terms, you see someone in Beit Knesset or wherever you go, and I like the look of that person. For some reason, God is in it. Don't take it lightly that you liked this person. It doesn't mean it'll be good, but God is there. God is there in things that are not good too. In things there's something extra, yetera. Some kind of knowing is going to happen now. You're going to go and you start talking to them and they talk to you, and then you make a date and you go out, and not only men and women I'm talking about. Yeah. And then there's a familiarity which creates knowledge. Is it really linear? First I just like him, like the look of him, and then I get to know him. I don't think so. I think that first sense of lechabev is already a sense of embracing the person. Lechabev means to embrace, actually. It's already a sense that I feel as if I know him. I feel as if, and then I kind of make it happen. I fulfill the potential of what I felt when I first looked at this person. And it may surprise me what I find out. I won't necessarily find out exactly what I expected. But that's how it goes, that it starts with, it's that mechabev moment is a very full moment. It's a very powerful moment. L'chavev, chaviv, apparently, I looked it up in various sources, including Jastrow, using how the word was used in Talmudic and Midrashic sources. And one of the things that I found to my surprise is that there is a Tosefta that talks about chovevin, to talk about wrestlers, two people who are fighting, who are in close body contact, like embracing. In other words, the thing about embracing and wrestling is that you are close. Mekarvo.
A bit like Krav.
A little bit like what?
Krav in Keruv.
Say it again.
Krav.
Krav. No, mamash. Mamash. Thank you. Great. To get close, karov, and the word krav, which means a battle. It's not an accident. Right? They don't seem to be related, but of course they are. You're too close for comfort, except in modern warfare, of course. So knowledge and dearness have an interesting reflexive relationship between them. It's not just first one and then the other. They feed each other. As in knowledge, each knows the other. It's not subject object. If you love someone and you get to know them, it's not just that you get to know them, but they get to know you as well, inevitably. And that's part of so there's something about this that's cumulative. Okay, so I just want to put that down and then look at how the word chaviv is used in the sources on our Lech Lecha story. Let's have a look now at number 1 on your page. El haaretz asher areka. Famously, looking back at Lech Lecha, Yud Bet Pasuk Aleph, Hashem says to Avram, Lech Lecha me'artzecha, mimoladecha, u'mi beit avicha. Get going from your immediate environment, your social environment, and your city environment, your municipal world where you live. All the circles that give you legitimacy, that give you a sense of, I'm a part of this. I am from Yerushalayim, right? I will go, and I live in Katamon, and all these things, to some extent, I'm willing to say, define me to some extent, at least. That I place myself in the world. Leave all that. Go out from your makom, actually, your place where you have a makom in the world. And go where? X. I'm not telling you. Asher Areka. Go to the land, a place which I will show you. El haaretz asher areka. Where clearly, destination unknown, you're to travel blind, and I want you to know you're traveling blind from the beginning. God could just not have told him where he was going, if you see what I mean. Could simply have omitted, tell the destination. Instead, he clearly indicates, I know, and I'm not telling you. Yeah. And if you insist on knowing, I have to tell you, I don't want you to know. This I don't want you to know. The condition of your Lech Lecha is to be that you travel in that, what should I say, vertigo way, that dizzy way of really not having your bearings, as we say. I don't know how to set the compass, where to look. And that is the existential situation of the beginning of our story. It's the beginning of the Jewish story. And, for me, it's extremely evocative of many periods of our history as a nation. And it's evocative, zooming in then, of experiences which are human experiences that the Jew also has, and perhaps has especially. And they're human experiences of dislocation, of not being sure, never mind even without the physical realities of exile. even if when you are living in Yerushalayim and you're a feeling of not knowing what world you live in, not what world you belong in, of what whole am I part, really, deep down, and not being able to find an answer. Just until God finally will show him. It takes him 7 verses in the Torah for God to say to him finally, L'zaracha natati et haaretz hazot. To your seed I have given this land. So then he knows he's arrived. You've arrived. Congratulations. Yishkoyach. Here you are. Takes 7 verses. But how long did it take in reality? In reality, you might say, well, maybe he knew all along somewhere that he was going to Eretz Canaan, because after all, his father had set out with the family originally from their place of origin, or custom, and had been heading for Eretz Canaan. That had always been the destination for some reason. And instead, they had stopped midway and settled down somewhere else. So it would be only logical to think that Abraham conjectures that that's going to be the destination. But most of the Mefarshim, most of the commentaries don't go that way. Simply, he's traveling. It could have taken years. If you glance at the Ramban, I don't want to look at it in detail, but we still have to get back to number 1. Vayomer Hashem where are we? El haaretz asher areka. Haya noded v'holech migoy el goy mamlacha el am acher. He was traveling around, wandering around. Holech v'noded. Noded, Ramban's text is his language is hypersensitive to quotes, to associations. Where have we met that root? Nun vaf daled. Here it's nun daled daled, but they're related. Not Cain. The curse of Cain. Na vanad. To be in constant motion is a curse. It means you can never put down roots. You can never decide, this is where I belong. This is my place. And Ramban wants us to look at Abraham in this moment of his life as having his experience has some of that quality. It's not a blessed experience. So perhaps it's to compensate him that God makes him all the promises and all the blessings that go along with Lech Lecha. And Rashi hints at something like that in his first comments in number 2. Normally traveling in that way is not good for all kinds of human needs, like fertility. It's not so good for fertility to be always on the move, or let's say away from your wife, even traveling together perhaps, or it's not good for your financial situation. You don't have a chance to build up. Yeah? And it's also not good for, what's the third thing? Oh yes, acquiring a good name in the world. If you're flitting around all the time, you don't actually build up a reputation. All right. And it's precisely those 3 blessings that God gives him to compensate him for a negative state that God is now asking him to enter into. It's almost like appearing to him in a dream and saying to him, I'm asking you now to submit to the shadows, to moving into the shadows. And here, I want to take a little leap and think of the word Tselem Elohim as containing the word sail. Are you up for this kind of shadows? That perhaps part of coming to know that one is in the image of God, that one has something of God in one, is somehow living in shadow rather than in bright light. That it's in the shadows or even in the darkness, that one senses most intimately the form of something emerge. Whereas a bright light, everything and nothing is seen. And that's what I want to look at when we come to look at the art here, but I'd like to get a little further first. In any case, let's go back now. The last Rashi at the end of his commentary, El haaretz asher areka, what we've just been talking about, the undisclosed destination, lo gila lo haaretz miyad. God did not reveal to him the land right away. immediately. Kedei lechabeva be'einav. There you have it. Chaviv. We've arrived at our destination, at least by the way. In order to endear it in his eyes, to make it precious and valuable to him. How does it make Eretz Yisrael valuable to Abraham as a subject, not just as a robot that God has set in motion and said, right, when you run down, you'll know if you'll have arrived. You know, when I tell you stop, you'll have arrived. God wants Abraham to be conscious, to be going through this period consciously, thinking and imagining, fully alive as he's going through the darkness. And he wants Abraham then to find his destination that involves him and penetrates him much more deeply because of the fact that it's unknown. You see what I mean? All right, if you have a complete piece of information, you're going to Eretz Yisrael, good, okay, I'll buy the tickets, and then I don't think about it anymore. But if I'm told something that casts the destination in shadows, then I really am intrigued, right? It gets under my skin. And I'm thinking about it, and I'm wondering, and that's called chaviv. That is, I'm beginning to struggle. There's something in me that, there's grit now. There's something in me that won't let me rest. And I'm now working with it. I dream about it, whatever. One midrash says about Abraham, there are a number of midrashim, we'll see some of them, but this is one that's very explicit. People would say about him, he acquired a local reputation as Meshugazeh, this crazy one. Now see that crazy one who's always traveling and doesn't know where he's going. Now that's a definition of Meshuga, Shogea, all over the place, right? Confused. That's Abraham. In other words, Abraham doesn't start off as one of the Avot, Avivah Avot, with all the dignity of that. He starts off as an old man. He starts off as a young man, let's say, youngish, let's say young, with some of the phenomena of youth that we know very well. And they were there in him, even if the Torah text doesn't tell us so explicitly. But there's something about what he has to experience that belongs to youth. And then once we come to understand what it is, I think we understand that it never stops. That in the end, that really youth never comes to an end. Young people have it extra bad, right? Most intensely. But it still remains with one. One can still wake up in the morning as one gets older and wonder, what world do I belong in? Even though one seems to have a world, right? It's not, these are human things, they're not matters of age. So now that we've talked about lechavev be'inav, to make it intimate to him, and there'll be a reward for every expression that God uses. I won't go further into Rashi here. He just points out that the same technique is used when God tells Abraham about the Akedah. That he says, go and take Yitzchak and offer him up on one of the mountains. He doesn't tell him which one. You'll know when you get there. And similarly with Yonah, he's to cry out against Nineveh. What is he to cry out? I have to wait to find out. What I'll tell you later. So a similar suspension, right? Constantly having your reality suspended. I can't just forget about it. No, you're made to be conscious of it. You have to think about it. There's a wonderful comment that's made by Ernest Gombrich, the art historian, on the way Rembrandt did his self-portraits, that the eyes are in shadow. The eyes, which are the most expressive part of the face, the most expressive part of the body, if you want to know someone, he deliberately shadows his eyes. Again, on the same principle. And the principle is one of incompleteness, that you don't want the eyes out there just telling you clearly what they mean. You want the eyes in shadow. To some extent, maybe there's a clue or two, the hint, but somewhere it makes you active in trying to acquire consciousness of the person with the eyes in shadow. And that's the way that perhaps Rembrandt wants to be known. He doesn't want to be known in a white, sterile light. He wants to be known in the shadows, where your imagination is in full play. So now I can come back to the Mer Shiloh, number one. We move from the classic to the almost modern 19th century, mid to late 19th century Hasidic commentary. Ela Aretz Asher. And suddenly we're given a full-blown portrait of Abraham's subjectivity. We go into his soul in a way that most commentaries don't do exactly. They hint at it. Avraham haya godel tchukato leida mekom dvekut chiyuto etzel Hashem yitbarach. Ooh, what words, layering of words of tremendous intensity. Chiba yitera. His great desire was to know the place where his aliveness could be attached to God. I'm translating. I'm trying to bring it closer than the words themselves. Where in his own experience, his sense of himself, in his subjectivity, he could find a place where he is fully alive and connects to God. Dvekut. And dvekut is not union. I want to start by saying that. It's clinging to someone else. V'davak bi'ishto. Yeah, Adam and Chava. Davak means maybe a moment of union, but on the whole, it's like chibek. It's the embrace again. It's the sense of an otherness that I'm drawn towards. And I want to get close to it, whether it's embracing or wrestling or whatever it might be. And so he wants to know, where is the place where that might be possible? That's his spiritual quest. And what's so moving about the Mer Shiloh very often is that he puts it in Kabbalist, he uses Kabbalistic type words here, but he's really thinking of what we call within a psychological frame. Where in myself, in my confused self that is all over the place, where the flow of consciousness, the way the unconscious keeps on popping up and determining things that I say or think, the dreams that I have at night. Avram had dreams too. They don't enter always into the text. On one or two occasions, there seems to be something like a dream that turns up. Avram is a much more interesting person than he may seem. And the Mer Shiloh is assuming that. He's saying Avram is really casting around, and everyone does, to find a home for his aliveness in some connection with God. Dvekut with Hashem Yitbarach. I hope I haven't brought it down too much. Where does it reach? How far does he have to go to look for such a place? Does it mean go outwards in space? Go travel here, travel there. That's what God told him to do. At the same time, there's that other level of the text that clearly is behind the Mer Shiloh here. Lech lecha. Go where you're really to go to yourself. And when we come to look at the major midrashim on this, we'll see that level is always somehow sublimated into the text. It's true, it's a physical journey. No, it's certainly not a journey. He's not to stay where he is geographically. He literally travels. But the travel is just a realization in the flesh of what's going on in his soul and in his mind. He's not different from his travels. He is the traveler. He is the one whose mind wanders. Okay. And by mind, I mean what is mindless in him. There is something mindless in our mindedness. It's not my sentence. We're so full of mind, conscious mind, but there's something in us that's not just conscious mind. Call it the unconscious. Something in us that's mishuga. Where did that come from? Where did that image come from? Why did I do that? Why did I say that? And so on. Stranger inside. And that's the question that he is obsessed with. And then God said to him, El ha'aretz asher areka, and look at this wonderful translation here. Behold, that is, your attachment, dvekatcha, yihyeh, I think it should be, will be b'makom hanikra asher areka. You will find that place of attachment in the place that's called, I'll show you. Yeah? That is, you will never come to a place, a physical place where you can just settle down and say, right, got it. There will always be something infinite about wherever you are, and something too much, but on the other hand, infinite, and infinite insights will come to you in that place. It will be a fertile place, even though it may not be a comfortable place. All right, it's not a place that will offer you all the answers, but it will raise a lot of questions, but perhaps something a little more than questions as well. You know, a sense of he'arot, not one great he'ara, but he'arot from the Ein Sof. And the Ein Sof is God, and the Ein Sof is in that place. It's not Ein Sof, endless space. It's an intensity of being, which is God, and he can be right in you. You can find that intensity in you. So that is the sense of the Shekhinah, Lecha. The Shekhinah is Becha. Now, I've jumped ahead of myself here, but we'll see as we go on. I think this invites us already into that kind of reading. Are we okay so far? Is anyone terribly troubled? No. Okay.
In the beginning, you said Teva, some word that wasn't here last week. So that's things Teva, something.
Did you say it again?
Teva. I know you said
Tselem?
using two words all the time.
Hibayetera.
What is it?
Oh, Chibayetera, Chibayetera.
I'm hearing.
Yeah, I know.
It's my problem.
Chibayetera.
Tera.
Yetera. Yeah.
Tera. What does that mean?
Extraordinary love. Surplus love.
Oh,
Too much.
That's something.
Yeah, so that's important for the journey. Okay. Having said that, let's now go into the first midrash. Number 4. Vayomer Hashem el Avram, Lech lecha me'artzecha. Okay, this is the beginning of Midrash Rabbah on Lech lecha. And all our midrashim are more or less right there in the beginning. Yeah. Rabbi Yitzchak Patach. Now, this is a complex structure of this midrash because it really contains 2 separate stories, and one is embedded in the other. Right. We're going to begin one story, break off in the middle, and then another story, and then we're going to go back to the first story. This is the structure, which already should alert us to something of this craziness, you know, of this sense of I can't get things clear. Things are not coming across as coherent. You know, it's what's that one? Vayomer Hashem el Avram, Lech lecha me'artzecha. Rabbi Yitzchak Patach, quoting from Psalms, out of the blue, Shim'i bat uri'i, listen, daughter, and see, and incline your ear. In other words, pay attention. I want your attention, my daughter. Who is the daughter? We are supposed to understand that this is a young woman who is leaving home in those times to go and meet and marry her future husband. And she is going, as many princesses and women of high status would have to do, you know, she's traveling to a distance. And she's going, in a way, to an unknown destination. Not in the sense that she doesn't know where she's going exactly, but in the important sense that even if she knows where she's going, she doesn't really know what she's getting into. She's never met him. She doesn't know him. And she doesn't know what the experience of marriage is. And now all this is imported into the story of Abraham. That this is Abraham's situation, like a bride who's traveling into mystery, traveling into Okay, strange identity for Abraham, right? It's a kind of wild way. It's the Midrash is being pretty, wrong gender, wrong, it's just everything's off, yeah? In order to jolt you by its distortion, there's a distortion here of some kind, which is eloquent. Amar, sorry. So he is traveling, this person, yeah, I'm sorry. So pay attention, v'shikchi amech, and forget your people and the house of your father. That's a quotation from Psalms. So pay attention and displace your attention to your past. Forget everything you've come from, not just travel away from it, but forget it. Don't pay attention to that anymore. Make space for something unknown, for what's coming. In other words, remake yourself in a way. You have to reinvent your subjectivity. It's a process of becoming. You're going to become other. You're going to become different from what you were. And that's what Abraham's life is. That's what it stands for. It's a constant lech lecha, which means, the Zohar understands that lecha letikuncha ulegormecha, for the repairing, perfecting, fixing of you, and the creating of you, ligrom. This journey will actually create you anew. And then suddenly the story breaks off. We'll come back to it. Rabbi Yitzchak then continued. What is this like? It's like someone, echad, shehaya over mimakom lemakom. Person who was traveling, moving on from one place to another place to another place. Place, makom. V'ra'ah, bira achat doleket. And he saw a castle, a fine house on fire. Apparently, according to the modern scholars, say that bira signified a tenement building. Right? I got this from Ilana's book. Lana Kirshman has written a wonderful book about reading to children. So anyway, a tenement building. What was peculiar about it? Why did he suddenly see something? He hadn't seen anything all along. He just moved from one place to the other. It was just a blur, which is the way one lives a lot of the time, right? Excuse me, this doesn't apply to you. But speaking for myself, a lot of the time, we're living in a kind of blur, go through the motions, maybe lost in some kind of reverie. And suddenly you're arrested by something. Ra'ah, he sees something. And it's a castle on fire. He said, what did he say then? Tomar, you could say, is it possible should I say? Right? He's asking himself, should I say this? That this castle is without anyone in charge. No one seems to be taking care of it. No one is maintaining it. Right? No one's looking after it. Manhig, hanhaga. It's not a question of creating, it's a question of looking after. Hitzitz alav balabira. And then the owner of the castle glanced out at him. Hitzitz, lovely word for looking at him. Suddenly there's a look. It's like his whole face becomes, the face of the owner of the castle is a face with an expression of hatzatza. Here's looking at you. I'm looking at you. And he says, I am the owner of the castle. Ani. Whatever you asked there, Ani. I'm here. And he looks at Abraham. That's a very important word. What is that hitzitz alav? Could have just have said, and then the owner of the castle said. Notice, it's very interesting once you notice, I actually noticed it for the first time, I think, this year, that there is no vayera before Lech Lecha. Right? It's not vayera Hashem el Avram vayomer, which will be the key, the code that you'll find, the formula that you'll find several times afterwards. When God speaks to Avram afterwards, he appears to him first. Now, what does it mean he is seen by him? Avraham now has a kind of form of attention that he is paying that recognizes God before God speaks, yet understands this is a God situation. He didn't have it before Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha did it to him. Lech Lecha was that experience that made him noda'at lo, that made him aware of the existence of God. Not because there has to be, not the philosophical Aristotelian question that the Rambam bases himself on in number 5, which I'm not going to look at, which is what makes the world go round. Look up in the spheres, and you might try to imagine what keeps them rotating around each other, the amazing order and majesty of the universe. What keeps it going? That's a philosophical question. And it's a quasi-scientific question. It's an astronomical question about the actual reality of the heavens. This is something else entirely. And so he's asking about the burning castle. So God then reveals himself, Hetzitz alav. Kach lefi shehaya Avraham Avinu. So because our father Abraham said, would you say that this world is without anyone in charge? Not just the castle, but this whole world. Haolam hazeh. Hetzitz alav. Right? This is the analogy. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God glances out at him and says to him, I am the master of the world. Baal Ha'olam, in the sense not really of the creator of the world, but being in charge, caring about. I'm the one who cares about the world. Who is the Ani? Who asks the question and who gives the answer? Obviously, Abraham asks and God responds. Right? That would be the obvious meaning. And I'm going to suggest something different. And this is the difficult territory that we're moving into. I'm very influenced by a brilliant young teacher and writer who writes in Hebrew only, unfortunately. His name is Yeshai Mevorach. You may have heard of his wife. What's her name? Something Mevorach. Uriah, something like that. Mevorach. She's. In any case, if all this world, anyone who has access to the writings of that kind might enjoy reading his books or watching his YouTubes. He gives shiur in Hebrew, and he's extremely brilliant and very edgy, difficult sometimes. And some of what I want to say, I've drawn from him. So I just want to put that on the table, for better or for worse, or whatever I'm doing with it. He quotes Rav Tzadok, who goes very far, very radical, as the student of the Mea Shiloach. He was the student of the Mea Shiloach. And we're going to look now at the Mea Shiloach and see what they have to say. What is the radical theological statement they're going to make? Who answers Avraham when he asks who's in charge of the world? Here, I think I want to just take a pause and, with my eye on the clock, have a quick look at this page. If you don't have one, I hope you have one, because it doesn't seem to be any extra here. Okay, these are illustrations from the book I mentioned last week that you may want to look at. It's called by Anton Ehrenzweig, and it's called The Hidden Order of Art, EHR, Ehrenzweig. And these are some of he is concerned with the two forms of attention, two ways in which one can pay attention to visual, let's say, to the visual world. One is with a focused, narrow look at something. That is, you have something very specific in front of you, and you look analytically, and you try to understand it and know everything that there is to know about it. And then it fits into a larger picture, but that's not your interest. You don't have anything really interesting to say in your language about the larger world. And then there is someone with a different kind of attention and a different kind of interest. And that is the person with a wide, unfocused, almost vacant, right? Vacant stare at the world. I'm deliberately using slightly negative words. This is, in our time, that's not the kind of attention that is valued. That's the argument of Ehrenzweig and also of the other writer I mentioned last week, McGilchrist, that in our time, it's the analytic, close analysis of detail that's valued. That's the empirical. That's looking at a reality and trying to say everything real that you can about it. No imagination, no intuition. You don't bring in any other orders of attention. On the other, there is that wide attention, which allows you to see the whole picture, sometimes at a glance. All it takes is one glance, and you see something that you won't see if you spend a lot of time trying to work out, well, what's the figure here and what's the background? Figure and ground. Isn't that our first analytical way of looking at a picture? What is it we're supposed to be focusing on? What's important? And then what's the background? So now I've got a gestalt. Now I know where I am. That's the narrow way of looking at things. Basically, he says we need both. Ehrenzweig says we need both, but the artist will very largely use the large one. That intuitive glance that tells him all kinds of things. Now let's have a quick look at distorted images, at ambiguous images that you can't make immediate sense of. All right, so for instance, starting with the caricature on the top left there, I included his comments on these objects. This is an old unqualified clerk in a big business organization. His moods of apprehension, depression, and high spirits are expressed by the various positions of his eyes. So you're prepared now for distortion. His eyes are going to turn up in all kinds of strange places. For instance, when he's happy, the two eyes descend to one nostril. Now, this, for a certain kind of mind, this is just unregulated. This is mishuga. I don't want to know. Nonsense. But look at it and see how effective it is. If you're not fixated just on the eyes and the nose, but you get the whole impression of the picture, you really see that his nose is smiling. Absurd as it may sound. So that you look and you get a much more emotional, it's a sudden grab at your emotions, rather than having to look and say, oh yes, his mouth is smiling, so he must be smiling, decoding the picture in a rational way. You get a more immediate sense because of the distortion. There are displacements. I've been arguing that Avraham is deliberately displaced, right? He's taken out of everything is in place life to a place of chaos, of incoherence. Perhaps something can become available to him from that place of incoherence. Have a look also then at Giacometti, very famous, right? I'm sure you're familiar with these figures. These are the statues, Giacometti's famous statues, tremendously elongated. They are okay, down here, yes, there is the thing. They come true if one accepts that vertical scanning can be done quickly without traversing the figure's thickness, which is slow. I don't know if you got that. The thing about a long figure like this is that you become aware of the speed at which you look at it. You don't need to look much. You get the point. It's long, and then you don't have to study every inch of it. You know it's going to be the same all the way up. And so you take in just in one moment, you take something in. That this is a person who is essentially this. There's something about this. Now, I'm not going to try to translate that into meaning, but it has a certain emotional impact because it's so quick. And it's so quick that it gets through your consciousness and reaches something unconscious inside. That's the theory. For instance, and this is the other image here, and this is the one that I find most interesting for our purposes, Rubens' double profile. You see what's maddening about it? Right? There's supposed to be two faces kissing, but you can never get them to actually kiss. Chiba. Right? Because if you focus on one as the figure and the rest is the ground, or this is the figure and that's the ground. So you're oscillating between two ways of focusing, whereas clearly the artist had both in mind at the same time as he drew that line. And he drew it fast, probably. It came directly from something that's not conscious. If he had been too conscious, he wouldn't have been able to move a centimeter. He would have been too nervous to move, right? I tried it to see if not a hope. Right? You have to have a fairly flexible inner world to be able not to be too rigid. Well, I sometimes suspect I'm a little too rigid. There is that. It's something I have to face. And I do my best to get over it. But something interesting experiment was done with this, showing this by a New York psychoanalyst. He showed this picture to people in subliminal form, that is split-second exposure on a screen. You don't really see it. It's split second and it's gone, talking of speed. And then he asked them to draw what they'd seen. And to his surprise, a good number of them, I think he says the majority of them, drew two faces facing each other. Which means that if one needs to penetrate the depths in some way, to bring the depth up to the surface, what's subconscious, what is there underneath, which a regulated life, doesn't actually want you to do. If you look at the last source in English on your page, you see a nice provocative quote there. This is Wilfred Bion, one of the 20th century English psychoanalysts, who writes here, this was a lecture he gave in Brazil, actually. While most people were saying, this is a terrible radio, right? He's listening to the radio. And most people would switch off right away. I can't possibly hear the program. The music is drowned by interference. Some difficult, perverse, stupid, ignorant, meshuga individual, I even repeated the word individual in my mistyping here, decided not to listen to the beautiful music and decided instead to listen to the interference. How perverse? How perverse can you get? Can you imagine anything more perverse, more stupid than that? Not to listen to Bach or Beethoven, but to listen to the interference? Nevertheless, not so many years later, somebody, right, an Echad Haya Avraham, that's Yecheskel, Echad Haya, well, somebody built enormous radio telescopes to listen to this interference, to listen to the background noises, and to discover black holes in space, and to discover, right, all kinds of emptinesses, all kinds of trouble, all kinds of interference, which are at least as interesting as the melody itself. And of course, he's applying that to the inner world. He's saying it's not just astronomers who do this, psychoanalysts do this. That's what the dangerous, stupid material that they're dealing with. And so let's look now at the Me'er Shiloh, which is our main text in this vein. Do have a look at the Rambam again, just for the sheer, for yourselves. We've looked at it in past years. Let's have a look at now the Me'er Shiloh, number 6. God said to Avram, go from your land, as it's written. And I can't really account for this. This is a kind of preamble, just a short quotation from Isaiah. How does it belong? Up to you to fit it in. Isaiah, God says, when I pour water upon the thirsty and liquids upon the dry land, let's say. And that's all. He doesn't refer back to it at any point. And take it in if you want. In other words, like the artwork, I'm not connecting it particularly, just that was that. And now let's see. In other words, what I'm getting from this is, meantime, is that God recognizes that it's not enough that he has plenty of water to offer. And down there is dry land. The separation between subject and object. There has to be a meeting between the two. And what happens when the water goes into the dry land? What does the dry land have to say about it? What is the consciousness of the dry land? What is the feeling like? What happens in that phenomenologically? The how of it. And now we move into the real material. here. When Abraham began to seek and to quest, this is the beginning of something. What was he looking for? Right? First of all, the assumption that he's seeking and questing. We have just induced that somewhere from the fact he travels without knowing where he's going, that there's some kind of quest. But here he just puts it up front. Obviously, he was looking for something. He was looking for the root of his own life, shoresh hachayim shelo, for the aliveness of his own life, from its hub, from its, the nub of his life. After he had come to understand, what sagacious people come to understand, that all the pleasures of this world, it's not sensible to call all those pleasures life. All those pleasures of life are not life itself. They're just there, they're necessities in order to clear the ground so that don't have any impediments. You're not hungry and thirsty and too poor to pursue the real question of life. The real question of life is quite apart from physical satisfactions. They can't be called life. Chayim amitiyim. Okay, so then a few lines down. So once he's free of all these disturbances of the physical world, he still wonders, what is guf hachayim asher alav nivret ha'olam? What is the very body of life upon which the world is created? And at that point, God said to him, Lech lecha. He's already questing before God says to him, Lech lecha. Now that's an assumption. Otherwise, perhaps God wouldn't have addressed him altogether. We'll see when we come to the end how that waves around. God says, go to yourself. For indeed, all the matters of this world are not worth to be called life. Nothing out there is worth calling life. Ve'ikar hachayim tinsa b'cha. And the principle of life, the main thing of life, right? The hub of life you'll find in yourself. Look in, not out. That's for a start.
Should we say Torah?
Sorry?
Shouldn't we say Torah is the essence of life?
Well, Torah is in. Torah its place is in. It's not out. Even if it's out there and I'm looking at it with certain, it's my consciousness of it. So it's a way of focusing attention on how you live. What's the quality of how you take in things from the outside world? One can take in Torah in many different ways. There are ways that one doesn't like. There are ways that one may regard as illegitimate. I don't want to get close to. Tim Sebecha. And then you have a quote from Isaiah, Ata tagil b'Hashem b'kadosh Yisrael tithalal, which sounds very normal. You shall rejoice in God. You shall exult in the Holy One of Israel. How does that fit in? Ata. You are the one, right? Look for it in yourself. That joy in God can only be found in you. It can't be found. You can travel the world, you can go to India and travel and so on. And in the end, all they will tell you is look in you, in a certain sense. In a certain sense, that will be the only place to look. And that, therefore, is the idea in this midrash. Mihu balabira, who owns the building, the castle? Hitzitz alav balhabira. Now, this is the most original reading. It's really very, very arresting. The owner of the castle peers out, glances upon him. Shouldn't it say hitzitz elav? He says. The expression is to look at someone. Look towards someone. Instead, alav is reflexive. Right? If you remember nothing else from this year, remember that. Reflexive, it means tir'eh be'atzmacha. Look at yourself. Doesn't mean introspection exactly. Look at yourself. Look at the pele of you. Look at the wonder of being you. And pele is not, wonder is perhaps not quite, wonder is very positive. I think pele really means the hiddenness. Pele, nifla, has the idea of mystery, of hiddenness. Something I can't quite understand. Something that's other, which could be very wonderful, or it could be uncanny. It could be a pele. Look at the amazement of what it is to be you. after all. And then he places Abraham at a certain time and place. He says perhaps Abraham actually lived or was still in the culture of Dor Haflaga, the generation that built the Tower of Babel. This is how it connects with last week. That was the world he lived in. And in that world, God had created an enormous confusion of languages, right? With translators necessary at every point because no one understood anyone else. And so it's a world of translation in which you never find anyone who really understands you. And that somewhere, right, that's what it says, Lo yishma ish et re'ehu. No one will hear, understand. Right? And that is the confused, incoherent world in which Abraham lives. And the essential point would be, and this is what I got very strongly from Yeshai's text, Yeshai Mevorach, that Abraham is part of that world. He's not just, he's different from everyone else. He is different, but he's different in being in that situation of confusion and incoherence and not knowing exactly where to find God in himself, how to connect with God. And nevertheless, God says to him, but look, you're different. What's your difference? That you ask the question about the burning world. No one else seems to care. In other words, the burning world is not just out there. It's in yourself. It's in yourself, and you're troubled by it. Har'amot libcha is the expression. Har'amot, with an ayin, ra'am, which means thunder on one level. It means turbulence, agitation. In the turbulence of your heart, of your soul, of your inner being, you are different from everyone else. Everyone else is at peace in all the incoherence, right? They kind of take it as muvan me'elav. That's how it is. But you, there's something yetera about you. There's something surplus in you, which gives you no rest. And start by acknowledging, appreciating the wonder of being like that. Now, what I assume from this is that Abraham, till God said to him this, Lech lecha, take a look at yourself and recognize how different you are from everyone else. Your nose is like the caricature, your nose is doing something different from everyone else's. Suddenly, become aware of your idiosyncrasy. His idiosyncrasy up to that point was not a happy one. He was not happy with himself. Why am I like this? That's the way that Mevorach, Yeshai Mevorach puts it, and I kind of like that. Why am I like this? Now, young people often walk around with that question. Why am I all over the place? Why don't I know from one minute to the next what I'm really about? Temperamental and unexpected and unpredictable and so on. And the assumption is that it's not only young people who have this, that we've got ourselves regulated as we get older, but there is that side of us still, especially among people who think, who make the mistake of thinking and reading and feeling and all those dangerous things. There is that sense of lostness, you don't necessarily have a map to the whole story. And God is saying to him, but there's something precious about that. Make friends with your lostness. Maybe that's putting it a little too strongly, but recognize that God in some way finds it chaviv. That's your tzelem Elohim. Strange to say. It's odd to say it. That the people who are b'tzelem Elohim are not necessarily, the great saints of the world. And Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen goes on to say even more radically that the ani of ani Baal Habira, when God answers, I am the owner of the world, you are included in that ani. You, Abraham, when you say ani, be aware that you share in that Baal HaOlam, that the Baal HaOlam is in you. It doesn't mean he's only in you. Right? He may be, who knows where else. Who knows where? No one knows where. Certainly in many people. But how does one come to know him in this radical view? One comes to know him not through moments of composure and static vision. Now I got it. One comes to know him through a very wide sense that includes great intensity inside oneself, inside one's narrow being, right? That there is an interior that is very intense and that in a sense can go much deeper because of the negation, because of the sense that this and this and this and this, all that is makom le makom. He just moves from one place to the other. He's not satisfied. And then a voice calls to him. It's called an interpellation in philosophy. Althusser was the philosopher who wrote about this. An interpellation is a call. God calls to Abraham. Right? God calls to Moshe. Yeah. What's the call? The call is just a voice that says your name and stops you in your tracks. There you are, on your journey through the world in a half days. And suddenly from the days, there comes a voice. So the voice comes from where? It comes from the inside. It comes from the inside, but it's a strange voice. It's a voice I didn't know before. And suddenly it comes from, and it calls one to attention and says, pay attention to all that's going on inside you and how you might in some way claim responsibility for it, how you might in some way respond, right, to this call. And this is Abraham's call, not from, someone in a castle out there, but actually from the essence of his own being. And it's a being it's a turbulent one, that's full of kushiot. He actually finishes with the word in the Gemara, the classic rabbinic word, for an intellectual question. What is the problem with this text? And then you have an answer, a tshuva, a shaila, a kushia and a teretz. And so he ends by using that language, and he says his question in itself constituted its solution. Now, this is redolent of Eastern mysticism, and yet Abraham is very clearly planted in the world. He's traveling with a wife, with a whole household of people, with a large society of people around him. He's not alone like some mystic on top of a mountain, but somewhere he's asked to become familiar with his own inner stranger, that there's something calling from all that turbulence, and that in itself is the answer. Now, that perhaps is what leads him to be, next step, we move into the next midrash. That's what leads him to connect with others and to become the first, right, Av Hamon Goyim. It means not only his own children, but the fact that he will become a father to many nations. That is, there will be many monotheistic nations, to put it literally. Yeah, he's going to be a great teacher. Put it like that. The Ramban describes him. Have a look at the Rambam. It's an amazing description of how he gathers myriads of people around him in the end, and they travel with him, and he talks to them, and not only lectures them, but he enters into dialogues with them, one-on-one dialogues, like Socratic dialogues, right? The philosophy, Aristotle and Plato are somewhere there in that passage, achieving knowledge through dialogue, through working with the knowledge of the other person and the ignorance of the other person. What makes you able to do that? If you know your own ignorance, if there is a not knowingness in you, if you have a shadow in yourself of strangeness and of otherness inside yourself, you're not entirely comfortable in your own being. So let's have a look now at this wonderful midrash in number 7. Vayomer Hashem el Avram, Rabrachia patach, l'reach shmanecha tovim, shemen turak shemecha. From the Song of Songs, something about ointments that yield a sweet fragrance, and your name is like finest oils. This is the lover praising the beloved, or the other way around. What a nice fragrance there is there. Okay. And that's how we begin here. Again, a proof text doesn't seem to be connected with anything, as so often. And now we'll see. It is connected. So, Amar Rabbi Brachia, what was Avraham Avinu like? Dome. I'm looking for an image now for him, right? I'm looking, is it going to be an elongated statue? Is it going to be, we're looking now a little wild now. We're looking for something strange. Ah, got it. It's a flask of balsam oil, tightly corked and placed in a corner. Now that is really that's an image of someone who is, excuse me, uptight. It's got a little drop of balsam oil in there, not much. It's a flask. It's a little flask. Let's imagine it that way anyway, like precious perfume. It's not doing any good in the world because it's tightly corked and it's wedged in a corner. That is lecha. Lech lecha. The lecha in this position is not being perfume. It's not doing perfume. Theoretically, potentially, it's perfume. And God says, uncork yourself. And the way of saying unplug yourself, right? In a way, let go some of the restraints and allow what to happen? Allow the fragrance to waft out into the world. In order for that to happen, the essential word is mitaltelet. Wonderful word. The tiltul. Tiltul is to be shaken up like a bottle of perfume. Yeah. I always remember the old bottles of perfume when I was young. Real perfume. Tiny, not eau de parfum, the real thing. A very, very expensive, tiny little thing. And then she would open something and just move it around a little bit so that it wafted out. That is, if you're going to make connection with the world around you, you're going to have to agitate yourself. You're going to have to allow yourself to leave everything that gives you prestige and a place in the world, and somewhere move into that world of agitation and allow that in some way to come through. It's through that, strangely, that you will connect with other people. Now, I'm overreading here a little bit, perhaps, but it seems to me it's hospitable to this kind of reading. If you just look towards the end, God said to Avraham Avinu, "Teltel atzmecha mimakom lemakom." So if you want, you can limit yourself to the physical meaning. Move yourself around, just pack your baggages every night. Every night you're going to have to pack up, keep going from place to place. A nomad, live a nomad existence. So if you want to limit yourself to that, fine. But I'm suggesting that this is a description of Abraham's soul, of his inner being. And it's a way of saying, by sitting safely closed up in one place, being you will not become you. The deepest you will only be known. I'll read a sentence that I like very much from another of the British psychoanalysts, Neville Symington. I think he was Australian. Symington, S-Y-M. It is what is most deeply me that has to be created. It is what is most deeply me that has to be created. I can only truly know that which I have created. That is, I start off as a bundle of possibilities. There's this and there's that. But once I focus attention on something, I begin to create it. I begin to open the bottle and allow it to take some shape, to come out into the world. Right? The perfume is not the ideal image for this, but it's somewhere the idea of focusing attention. Understanding comes when something within the personality receives attention. It's a very, very down to, I didn't know I was such and such, but my therapist keeps telling me I am such and such. Now, call it suggestion, and that's not a good thing. We don't want suggestion. Suggestion is it's simply putting an idea into your head, right? That's the suggestion, and then making you curious. What is it for me to be whatever it is? Really? I never thought of it that way. You know, begin to just to focus and to reshape, to shape oneself, one's subjectivity, to make it real in the world, to make it really work on some level in the world. So that's the perfume, and I just wanted to share with you, just for the enjoyment of it. Again, I looked it up, and I came at, of course, English is a very rich language. I hate to say it, but richer than. And here are the various translations for telltale, which is a doubling of the root tul, netilat yadayim. You know, all these are connected. It means to take something up, to pick something out and pick it up. And tiltul is the agitated form of that. Okay, to swing, to hurl, to be in exile. Road fatigue is teltelet. I used to know a lot about that. To be shaken up, to be confused, to be distraught, to be deranged, to lose one's balance, to be homeless, to be banished, to be decentered. Right? Very rich language. Now, that is taltel atzmacha. No one does it to Abraham. You could say life does it to him, but it's not so simple. You know, even when it's never simple when we say life did this to me, you know, because it's always me. You know, I did this to me. I took my life in that direction. There's always some agency in these situations, and somehow that was God. That's the straight. This is a theological. It's a theological moment we're talking about, the moment of tiltul, of this kind of agitation. With that, let's go to the next. Number 8. Lecha tal yaldutecha, from Psalms. To you is the dew of your youth. Again, so dense. There's something bizarre about it already. Yours is the dew of your youth. What does that mean? Even in context there in Song of Songs. But now it's taken out of context and applied to Abraham. And notice that, again, excuse me for this, but tal and tiltul have some relation to each other. No relations in the dictionary. You won't find any relationship in the real world. But in the world of the unconscious, you know, there's something there. There's a resonance. Lefi shehaya Avraham Avinu mitpached, because Abraham was anxious. He said, would you say, right? In the Midrash, Abraham often says, would you say? It's like a tick. He's always asking himself, is this the right thing to say? Is that the right? He's asking himself, he's conjecturing. He's not someone who knows. He's someone who's aware of not knowing. He's exploring. Tomar, sheyesh biadi avon, that I hold in my hand sin, a leftover from all those years when I used to be an idol worshiper. Now that's a genuine worry. You know, that's something that you could really worry about. You know, my misspent youth. You know, what I was doing all those years. Perhaps it's still lingering. It's still, you know, I still smell of it. You know, it's still there. And God answers it with this mysterious expression, Lecha tal yaldutecha. Do you hear what I'm just saying? The Lecha from the Lech Lecha means it's a reference to yours is the dew of your youth. Right? You take that as a that's the bubble here. What we have, Lecha tal yaldutecha. It's the Midrash's translation of Lech Lecha. Go into that story of the dew of your youth and it being yours. What does that mean? And so it's unpacked a little bit. God then says to Abraham, yours, lecha, lech lecha, is the dew of your youth. It belongs to you. Just as dew evaporates, so your sins evaporate. Poreach, fly away. Right? Evaporate in that very visual sense of fly. Mahatal hazeh siman bracha leolam. Just as this dew is an indication of blessing, a sign of blessing. Now, again, it's very rich. It's not blessing itself. Dew is not blessing. It's nothing. It's barely anything. You know, it's a little moisture that it wouldn't be enough to have only dew. But it's an indication of blessedness. Something, when you see dew, you know that there is blessing in the world.
As we started yesterday, Talmud time.
Yes, Ten Tal Bracha. Yep. Yeah, Femod, thank you. Beautiful, beautiful. We say in the Shemona Esrei, Ten Tal Bracha. I'm surprised it didn't occur to me. Okay, that's why it's good to have you all here. Just as all right, so it's a siman bracha la'olam. So you are a sign of blessing to the world. In other words, not you are a blessing, although God that says that too. Heye bracha. I want you to be a blessing. But the Midrash puts it more delicately and says, you know what you really are? Your existence is an indication of the possibility of blessing in the world. Right? It's a hope for hope. Because you contain in yourself the theological situation of Olam Hazeh, you know, of where everyone is now. And you are an indication of some kind. And the dew evaporate. What sense do we make of that? And so for the 10 minutes we have left, let's have a quick look at the Talmud that tries to make sense of all this. Quotes this. Amar al-Brachia again. Knesset Yisrael, the community of Israel, asked for something that was unreasonable. Shelo kahogen. The English translation is very nice on your page. Lo kahogen. V'akadosh baruch hu heshiva kahogen. To which God gave a reasonable response. They wanted something unreasonable, and God slightly corrected them and said, no, this is what I'm going to give you. They said in Hosea, V'neid'ad nirtava ladat Hashem, we are urgently seeking to know God, who will appear, who will come out, mutza'o, as sure as the morning. We're absolutely sure that as morning comes, you know, that God will come out and we'll know him. And he will appear to us like rain. Right? That's the pasuk in Hosea. That's what they ask for. And God answers them, my daughter. You know, there's always a tender moment in the Midrash or in the Talmud when God addresses Israel as Biti. With all our questions about the gendering in the Talmud and the Midrash, there certainly is a tenderness about that expression. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it couldn't be B'ni. It's the other form of attention. At sho'elet davar shepa'amim mitbakesh ufa'amim eino mitbakesh. You're asking for something that sometimes is desirable and other times is not desirable, or in other translation perhaps sometimes it's real and sometimes it's not real, something like that. But I will offer myself to you as something that's always desirable and realistic. I will be like dew to Israel, and it's also from Hosea. It's a beautiful artifact, this midrash. It's putting together, they're not together, those two quotations. He puts them together. So what's the difference between rain and dew? And speeding on, number 10, here is the answer of the Shem Shmuel, who was one of the Hasidic greats of as a Torah commentator in the 19th century. Number 10. We have to understand this mashal about the dew that evaporates. And so he quotes his father, who said, Yavo kageshem lanu, what we just saw that in the Talmud. And he says, what they're asking for is God as rain. And the rain, what's wrong with rain? Rain moistens the earth and then sinks into the earth and stays there. Nish'arba. Oh, isn't that good? You know, when the sun shines, it'll still be there. Isn't that good? No, that's not what you want of God. You don't want a God who comes at you, you know, from the outside, and, you know, implants something in you that just there is there as a foreign object in you, as it were. And all right, it's good for you. You want dew. You want God as dew. What does dew do? Rakm or rare. It just arouses the natural moisture of the grass. Now that's an image. I don't know what dew really does, but it's like kissing, you know, it's like the kissing image. That dew just arouses something. It touches and barely touches. It's invisible. If you haven't got good eyes, you may not even notice the dew on the grass, even if you get up early. You know. So it's very modest. It's very nothing. It's not a thing. All it does is arouse a process. It provokes something. It evokes something. And that is what you really want. You want God as that. You need that in your lives. And how does this refer to Abraham then? And his sins. And here comes a really distorted and displaced application. In other words, it's a little strange at first. Your sins, I'm paraphrasing, it's worth reading. Your sins, like dew, will evaporate, unlike rain. They'll touch and evaporate, but they will have an effect that is because of you, the fact that you were an idol worshiper at one time, that you went through that confusing journey and you actually lived it with your full life, and you realized that you couldn't find satisfaction in it, that somewhere in Bomamash, that you couldn't find true living in it, true aliveness in it. You couldn't arrive at true aliveness unless you had that experience of going through it. So like the dew, it touched you and it evaporated, but it left an effect behind it. In Kabbalistic language, this is the Roshem. This is the trace that's left behind. And in order to provide an analogy, he says it's like Shabbat. That after Shabbat leaves, mistalek mimenu, it goes away. Hopefully, it has aroused us. How does he put it? Hopefully, it has aroused us. This is in the Neshama Yetera. There you have Chiba Yetera again. That's the excess nature of the Shabbat. That something is left over. After Achara Shabbat mistaleket mimenu. Right? So it leaves in man a surplus soulfulness. You know, some intensity is left over. The intensity that is in Abraham couldn't be there if he hadn't been through that experience of Lech Lecha, you know, of that. But what we've been trying to put into words here, so that when he came to the worship of God, the experience at the end was that all potential human energies were aroused in him, which ultimately is the centermost point in his heart. And ad shenit karev v'nidbak b'Hashem Yitbarach. And there are those themes of coming close and clinging that we started with, dveikut and intimacy, nitkarev. That's a process that Avraham had gone through. And by way of finishing, with my eye on the clock, I want to say this. I don't think this means that Avraham, at some early point in his life, had this experience, and then he went on to a life of perfect equanimity and knowing exactly what he's about, and just kind of teaching it with nice little adjustments to the audience. I assume what it means is that it's a life's work in different ways, in different levels. And it's a life work of dealing with the negative, of dealing with the complexity of the picture, and trying to find a way of including everything and seeing it at a glance, finding something that satisfies his innermost self, who he really is. I finish with the Sfat Emet. Can't resist going back to the beginning here. He quotes the question that Ramban asks about Lech Lecha. Why did God choose Avram without letting us know at all from before that, chibato, why he was particularly beloved. In other words, why was Abraham chosen if he wasn't special, right? We're not told in any way that he's special. He's just, we're told something about his father and the family, and they travel, and he's married, and she's barren. In other words, he's really in the morass of life, of frustration and real life. I'm not told anything about his beautiful spirit or seeking, nothing. But the assumption here is that he must have had some special chibah. God must somehow loved him to choose him. But the answer, he says, it's an evasive answer. He says his shevach, what is his excellence? What was special about him? That he heard the Lech Lecha cry, that comes from God to all people at all times. L'chol ha'anashim b'chol et. And again, that's a displacement. Suddenly, our expectations are undermined. I started by thinking that Avram was special because God, his specialness made God talk to him. No, turns out that God talks to everyone. That since God is inside, everyone talk. God, that voice is, no one could open their ears to it. And that comes from the Zohar, actually. The root of that is in the Zohar. And he just elaborates on that and says, what is his specialness then? That he had a vulnerability, right? He had a kind of openness to taking himself seriously. And so God could say to himself, Lech Lecha, and he could take it in a kind of, in the way of love, in the way that is the way of love. Any immediate thoughts?
Well, that sort of balances the Dorach Laga, where they heard but they couldn't hear anything.
Good.
Yet he was able
Great.
to-
That's really nice. Yes. And he couldn't yet see, right? But he heard. The first thing is hearing, which is clearly from the outside. Yeah.
Your dress is like a pillar, like pillars. It's vertical, and you are a pillar that holds up the world.
I have trouble in hearing. I must talk to the office.
Your dress is like a pillar because it has vertical stripes, and you are a pillar that holds up the world, Avivah. You are the fourth pillar.
That's understood. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I can't really.
I'm in the hospital bed, probably high from medicine.
You have to leave. Please feel free. Yeah.
The title of the book, The Hidden Order of Art.
Say again? What?
The Hidden Order of Art.
Hidden Order of Art. EHR.
No, but who's?
Ehrenzweig. EHR. HREN. ZWEIG.
Wait.
ZWEIG.
Where is that film?
I don't know. You could try a library. You have to order it. If you order books,
I can.
okay.
Okay, thank you. I won't ask you how, but I'm giving a little more to Noah, as you did, in the Odlo possibility.
That's right.
You didn't talk about it last week, but the Odlo impetus.
Yes.
Is alive enough, 10 generations.
Yeah.
And it now
And it comes out.
to fruit.
That's it.
I think that's.
Beautiful. And I know this is what you, I agree with you. I feel.
I was thrilled with your lecture.
agree.
Last night, but I must say,
Thank you.
and thank you.
You have my subsidiary memory.
Well, it isn't a memory, it's a belief in your,
I
in your
know,
words.
I know.
Okay,
Yeah.
be well, thank you.
You are.
Can I take an extra?
You sure can, yes, yes. Just a minute, not my copy.
No,
This one. No, that's not it.
Okay,
Oh, no, this one and this one.
This,
One of the, each one had, the text.
so,
No,
for philosophy.
that's not it.
Okay, never mind.
Here.
Okay, but for philosophy, but a couple of them are not, here, I may just write to you, Nancy.
Okay, do.
Thank you.
Continuing reading of Neiman.
Yes.
Yesterday I was reading
Yes.
about what you're talking about.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It's